This is Dharma Drops with your host, Rebecca Warfield. This podcast is a little bit about yoga, a little bit about life, and a little bit about whatever. And just as a warning, this podcast is unscripted, so that means I might regret a few things that I say. But hey, maybe I'll say some pretty awesome stuff too. Remember, these are musings, not truths. Buckle up, giddy up, because here we go. Hey guys, just a few notes before we get into this episode of Dharma Drops podcast. This episode is releasing on January 31st, 2020, which is the day before Dharma Drops 1 year anniversary. Holy shit, we survived the first year. And by we, I mean you and me. It has been a whirlwind of amazing guests, content, conversations, products, courses, you name it. It has been amazing. But the most amazing part has been you. Thank you so much for listening. If you're not doing so already, please follow Dharma Drops podcast on Instagram and join the mailing list by going to dharmadropspodcast.com/join the list. That's DHARMADROPS/join the list. JOINTHELIST. dharmadropspodcast.com/join the list, because in celebration of the 1 year anniversary, or I like to call it the birthday of Dharma Drops podcast, all month long, I'll be doing special offerings, giveaways, and more. So you do not want to miss this. Just a few notes before you get into the episode about non-birthday party related things. Number one, I got the handle of my Instagram wrong in this episode because I don't know. I'm just talking over here. It doesn't necessarily mean I know what I'm talking about. So the handle is at Dharma Drops Podcast on Instagram. So follow on Instagram at Dharma Drops Podcast. I also want to note that it's really exciting that Dharma Drops is now available on Patreon. There's exclusive content, discounts, giveaways, and more. So you can get merch, yoga classes, meditations, exclusive podcast episodes, and discounts for digital offerings, all on Patreon for as little as $2 a month. So when you become a patron on Patreon, you're helping support the production of Dharma Drops Podcast, and you're helping a one-woman business continue to do the damn thing. And as a result, we're also uplifting each other because it gives the opportunity for me to host more amazing guests, more small business owners, and to spread the word more about intentional, authentic living, yoga, life, whatever, all the things that we do on Dharma Drops podcast. So head over to patreon.com, that's patreon.com/Dharma Drops, DHARMADROPS, patreon.com/Dharma Drops. Okay, happy 1 year birthday to Dharma Drops, and to you listeners for being a part of this podcast journey for the last year. Here we go, into a kick-ass episode and into a kick-ass 2020. Welcome back to Dharma Drops, guys. This is your host, Rebecca Warfield, and I am here today with Veronica Ricksen, creator of Kapu. How's it going, Veronica?
Oh, everything's going good. Thank you, Rebecca, for having me today.
Yeah, of course. My pleasure. So we met, actually, we haven't even really met. You're in California, is that right?
I live in the East Bay of California.
Oh, I have a friend who did some yoga training in the East Bay recently and loves that area.
Yeah, it's fun and sweet. So
yeah,
I'm happy to be here. Mm-hmm.
I have not been to many places in California. I've been to San Diego, which is lovely, and I have been to Hollywood, and I did not love Hollywood. Sorry, Hollywood, no offense.
I don't think I've been there yet, actually.
It was like kind of gross. I actually left early. I was not into it at all.
Yeah.
I had to get out of there. But otherwise, I've only been to San Diego, but it was beautiful. Mm-hmm. So maybe one day I'll get out to your neck of the woods.
Yes. Yeah, that would be fun. I'll take you on some of my favorite hikes.
Ooh, I love hiking. So do you hike regularly out there?
Yeah, that's, I live near the hills. There's a lot of hills in this area. So that's my favorite type of exercise, or just walking, actually.
I love to go for walks. I was actually just saying today how I really wanted to take my dog for a walk because it is December 16th, where we are recording. For those listening, it's probably already 2020. So hello from the past. But It is freakishly warm here in North Carolina today. It's like almost 70 degrees, which is very strange
Oh, wow.
this time of year. I mean, it kind of fluctuates here up and down, but it's pretty warm for this time of year. So maybe we're just getting a little bit of the California vibes. Yeah.
Yes, you are, because it's not like that here.
Oh, really? What's the temperature there?
I think it's about 50 right now,
Oh,
which
shoot.
for me, that's pretty cold.
Actually, I didn't know it really got that chilly there during this time of year. Does it ever really get that cold there? Is that normal?
Yeah, especially in the mountain
Oh,
ranges, it could get, to the 30s, or it's snowing over there right now.
oh,
Yeah.
God. I don't like snow. Do you like snow?
I like sledding, but besides that, I'd much prefer being in hot weather.
Anytime anyone mentions sledding, I grew up in Western Maryland in the mountains, and I think about I would go sledding every time it would snow because it snows a lot in Western Maryland.
Hmm.
And we would go sledding in these big hills. And when you got to the bottom of the hill, the only choice was to either bail or go sled across the street. And so, of course, we always went across the street. How we did not get hit by cars and die, I have no idea.
That sounds like a really fun childhood memory.
Maybe or dangerous. Sometimes I
Yeah,
think back, I'm like, what were my parents thinking letting me do that? But what do I know?
right.
But anyway, so now that the Dharma Drops listeners have just listened to our like weird, random personal conversation, let me introduce you. So, Veronica, we met because I found your menstrual calendar journals on Etsy, and they're
Mhm.
so beautiful. And then, so I started creeping on your website and found that you are the creator of the Kapu community. And I've been really inspired by the work you're doing. So, I'm really excited to have you on the show today to talk a little bit about what you're doing in the world of holistic women's health and so on. So, can you share with us a little bit just about what the Kapu, I keep saying Kapu community, but
Yeah.
what Kapu is?
So, so it all started completely by accident. Basically, it all started when in 2015 is when it really started. When I decided to get off of all types of birth control, and also when I decided to get off my acne medication, and
Mm,
both things that I was pill wise and also things that I was using topically.
mhm,
It suddenly just really, really registered that I was really causing myself harm. And
mm,
it just really didn't resonate with me to just blindly keep taking these medications that I thought ultimately were probably just doing more harm than good.
mhm,
So through that initial, I guess, wake up, um, eventually I began my little business called Kapu, which means taboo or sacred in Hawaiian.
oh,
Um,
cool.
yeah. And as I started getting in my woman's health journey, I was just thinking of adjectives or words that really kind of resonated with what I was feeling about the female reproductive system. And taboo and sacred were definitely on my list of words that I wanted to kind of exemplify my business. And one day, or actually on my honeymoon, I was in Hawaii, and I came across a cave, and there was a sign that said kapu, and it meant taboo or sacred. And I'm like, this is exactly what I'm trying to say in just one succinct word. It's so beautiful.
Mhm.
And also, caves can symbolize a woman's reproductive region too. So it just felt perfect and symbolic.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. That's awesome. And I think it's interesting that you're talking about taboo and sacred because I kind of get on some rampages sometimes in
Mhm.
conversations about like this taboo nature of the female body. And
Mhm.
like our culture, it is taboo. It's like, oh, we shouldn't talk about that. I think in a recent episode actually with CA Gresham, she talks a lot about women's health because she's 30 and had just finished her last round of chemo for breast cancer. So she's definitely on a mission to talk about women's health. And we were talking about how so much that deals with the feminine in our culture is taboo. And we even use language like feminine hygiene, right? All these
Mhm.
things like, I don't know, that makes it feel taboo, but it's actually deeply sacred.
Right.
the experiences of the woman's body and the things that our bodies are able to do are deeply, deeply sacred. So that's really beautiful. The kapu word is a really beautiful, and I think succinct word to
Yeah.
talk about it. That's
Right.
awesome.
And just kapu means a lot more than just that. And I'm not Hawaiian, uh, so I do just want to
Mhm.
mention that there's so much more that goes into that word, and I want to give respect to that word and to the Hawaiian and Polynesian people. But
Yeah,
I just
absolutely.
think it's a beautiful word, and I'm very glad that they came up with it. Yes. Yeah.
When you think about language, sometimes when we go into other cultures and stuff, I mean, I am an English instructor and I actually have a master's degree in English language, but I joke I'm not a master of English language, even though I say that I am. I'm not. But I do think that other languages sometimes have really beautiful ways of describing something complex in a single
Yeah.
word that we don't
Right.
necessarily have in English. So it is beautiful,
Yeah.
the word kapu. So, can you tell us a little bit then about what you do with your business?
So it's always changing and evolving because I really love creating things that I need myself, and I'm not really finding them anywhere else. And so
Mhm.
that's how really most of my ideas and creations come about. But primarily, I work as a herbalist in a clinical setting. So I work strictly with female body people, but I work primarily as a source of kind of education and resource sharing. And I like to support these women with different herbal remedies and diet and lifestyle choices, um, usually centered around female reproductive system,
Mhm.
but not always, because everything is connected always. So that usually goes into the nervous system, the digestive system, and all that fun stuff. But I
Sure.
really just resonate mostly with women, because I am one, and that's my experience. And
Mhm.
I love my work, and I love meeting new people and hearing their stories, and just really supporting them along their journey.
Mhm.
Because I feel like we are always on a journey to feeling better and being better and happier versions of ourselves.
Yeah, for sure. So I like how you said that sometimes, I mean, obviously you work with the female reproductive system, but that sometimes that move into other parts of the body. And it makes me think about a lot about the yoga practice. Do you practice yoga by chance? We haven't even talked about
You
that.
know, I have in the past. I'm not very regular about it. I go through phases where it does seem very um, good to me and I crave it. And other times I want nothing to do with it, to be
I
honest.
get that.
Yeah, yeah.
But in the yoga practice, we're always talking about how, it's a full body experience.
Hmm.
So we're not doing anything in the body ever that's just one thing. So it's not surprising to me that you discover that maybe the starting point is the female reproductive system, but that it's not isolated. It's not sitting there all by itself. That's a
Yeah,
full body experience.
right.
Hmm.
And what's interesting is probably about half of the women I see, some of them know that I'm all about the menstrual cycle, and I love talking about it. And I think it's just amazing that females have it. And then the other half have no clue that that's kind of my primary work. And
Interesting.
maybe they were just referred to me by somebody else, or yeah. Um, and so they'll start talking to me about their menstrual cycle in kind of a negative way, that they don't like it. It's annoying, or just what have you.
Hmm.
And I definitely, I don't say anything that I've created resources around it, and I think it's such a beautiful gift and all that. I keep that to myself, and through our sessions, I do like to try to encourage people to maybe shift their perspective, or um, maybe challenge them to think about it in a different way. And I just like seeing how maybe their ideas around the menstrual cycle can shift gradually.
So, and
Over
that's
time.
and that's actually sort of how I found you. So, it's kind of a long story, but I was having some of my own issues with like womb stuff, and then I was, recently recorded an episode with CA, who I just mentioned, who she's been very open about this even on the podcast, so I feel comfortable talking about it. But her cancer treatment basically suppressed her reproductive system, and she has gone through early menopause, and that's it, because they had to basically shut down her ovaries to ensure that she doesn't get breast cancer again. And my friend Angela, who I mention on this podcast all the time, what up, Angela? I talk to her on the phone like 10 times a day. So hi again, Angela. Through these experiences, because she's friends with CA too, we got into a conversation about how for most of our lives, we've so negatively talked about our periods and about menstruation and the entire cycle of being a woman. But that if we could shift our perspective, it's actually really sacred and really important to who we are. And so that's how I found you. I was searching through the internet and through Etsy looking for really anything, products, articles that help us get a little more connected. Us, when I say us, I mean women, but anyone really who wants to get connected to their body. But in this case, I was really thinking of women and those who are menstruating, to help them get more connected and shift their perspective about menstruation. So I'm pretty interested in that. Do you have any examples of like the ways in which shifting the perspective can help us as women?
Well, first off, I think people start having a negative idea about the menstrual cycle if they're physically experiencing pain or discomfort or in really, really horrible moods leading up to their bleeding days, right?
I'm just laughing because that's me. Because I swear, one time I had to go to the gynecologist and they were asking me about my mood. And I was like, well, before my period, I basically hate everyone, but it might actually just be the truth coming out.
Right. Yeah. Right.
And the gynecologist looked at me like I was crazy, but I'm pretty sure I was right.
Yeah. So, let's get into that too in a little bit. But I really just want to acknowledge people's pain and suffering around it first, because if you're physically in pain or just in a horrible mood, chances are you're not going to think about the menstrual cycle as a gift or something. Think about bleeding as actually an enjoyable time, right? So I do have some recommendations around dietary and supplements and herbs that can kind of support that. But let's say you start taking some changes in your diet or your supplements, and you're no longer experiencing horrible cramps, and you're not nearly as irritated as maybe you once were. Then you might be able to think about the menstrual cycle in a different light. So if you notice that you're feeling irritated towards your premenstrual phase, I think that's great to take note of, and actually literally take note of it in a journal somewhere on pen and paper, because when you are irritated and you take note of it versus verbally lashing out at your partner or coworker or yourself.
Sorry, I'm just laughing because I feel like you're talking to me. Like,
this is most of our experiences. Definitely, most of our experiences. So if you kind of just sit tight, knowing, okay, I'm very irritated right now, I'm not dismissing it, I'm going to write it down and curiously observe what I'm irritated about. And just hold tight, sit with that just for a few days. And then as soon as bleeding, your menstruation comes around, all of a sudden things usually shift pretty quickly, as physically and emotionally as a release. But it's also a time where a lot of women you're almost in more of like a naturally meditative like state. So you can kind of gain a lot more insight if you're a person who likes to meditate or pray, maybe go on nature walks, or maybe you're a little bit more sleepy during this time. It's usually a time of really good receptibility. So if you're looking for insight or answers to your prayers, or maybe you'll receive inspiration, a way you can work out a problem with your partner or your coworker or yourself. I like to encourage women to wait until they're actually through bleeding to address whatever was irritating them in their premenstrual phase.
That's so interesting, because I kind of joked about the gynecologist situation, but I was like, it's just the truth. But actually, that is the truth, because often it's the things that are like deeply bothering me that I can't get out or I can't sort through that start to surface at that time.
Right.
And, you know, I joked like, oh, it's like my anger is just the truth, but it kind of is. And sometimes I do think it gets a little mixed up with like other things. It's, you know, it's kind of a funky time, the premenstrual phase sometimes.
Yeah.
But then, like you said, the moment bleeding starts, I start to have a little more clarity about those feelings. But I never thought about it as like a meditative time. That's really interesting. So with that in mind, then, once, you know, we get on the other side of that, so just to make sure I'm on the same track, once we're on the other side of that, we move through this meditative state while we're bleeding. And then after that is when we should take action. Is that correct?
Right. So after you've had kind of like your little hibernation, your time of a little bit more quiet rest and reflection, your estrogen starts building up again. And with that estrogen building, your brain is actually more apt for conversation and social interactions. You're just a little bit more quick-witted. And so that is the time for inspired action and for using your language skills and your emotional intelligence really to act or to say what you want to say in order to kind of bring resolution to a situation or in order to start new projects.
You know, we hear a lot about, I don't know, at least in the yoga world, we talk about the menstrual phase as like the moon phase, you know, and this association with the moon. And in terms of like the yoga philosophy, the yoga practice, and some Eastern philosophies, the moon phase is the time of quiet. You know, it's when we sit with our things and we sort of let the pieces fall where they may. It's not a time of action. And so I always hear yogis talk about this as the moon phase, but it's really interesting to think about it in that relationship, that this is not the time to take action, that the bleeding time is the time to sit, let things, you know, fall as they may. And then we develop the skills. Like I like what you said, we get to use our communication skills, whatever, later to start working through those things.
Right.
That's interesting. Do you ever think, I don't know, what are your thoughts about the period and the moon? Do you believe that there's a relationship between the two?
Yeah, I do. I definitely do. I think maybe today in our more urban societies, it's a little bit more difficult because we have electricity and we're not as connected to depending on the moon for light during the nighttime. But in ancient societies, they absolutely were. And well, just real quick, like historically, it's been noted that females did bleed usually on the new moon, and then they were ovulating on the full moon. And then sometimes it could be reversed. There's a really great book. If somebody wants to learn more about this, there's a really great book called Red Moon.
Oh, cool.
By Miranda Gray is her name. And it goes all into the history and the tradition of women bleeding with the moon cycles.
Oh my God, Becky, where did you get those bracelets? They are so cute.
They make me look like a yogi, and I got them from you at spiritualjunkies.com. Duh. Maybe I'm a little bit biased, but the Dharma Drop Smile bracelet, it's my favorite.
You can go to spiritualjunkies.com, and in the new year, there are so many different handmade bracelets, all genuine gemstones, and they help you hold your intentions.
And that's the thing I love so much about Spiritual Junkies. Mala bracelets, they're handmade, they're authentic, and I get to take my intention with me everywhere I go. So, Deanie, can you tell us where we can find all of your malas this year?
spiritualjunkies.com, and there's a promo code for Dharma Drops. It's code DharmaFriend for 15% off.
Awesome. So guys, you can head over to spiritualjunkies.com and save 15% on a single order with the promo code DharmaFriend. That's spiritualjunkies.com, spiritualjunkies.com with the promo code DharmaFriend, DharmaFriend. Ready for a shift? Become a yoga teacher. Whether you are searching for a career change, additional income, or want to dive deeper into your own yoga practice, Longwave Yoga's yogic studies and teacher training will surely transform you. Apply for one of Longwave Yoga's 2020 200-hour programs today. Longwave Yoga's program is offered in Wilmington, North Carolina, March 6th through August 16th. Longwave Yoga programs are geared toward yogis like you who would like to take time to dive deeply into the suggestive practices and texts in order to fully assimilate and comprehend the material and to weave the experience into your daily life. Are you ready to take your training to the next level? If so, start your 300-hour training today as the Longwave Yoga 300-hour program is open for enrollment. You can learn more about the programs at longwaveyoga.com. That's LONGWAVEYOGA.com. longwaveyoga.com. So in my own experience, for sure, where our bodies are kind of like mixed up, like you said, in our modern culture, it's just everything's a little out of whack. You know, our bodies are a little bit mixed up, but I did find that when I am consistent in my yoga practice, I will start to clearly sync with the moon. And I think my cycle's all kinds of messed up right now. I don't know what's going on with it. It's crazy.
It's okay. It happens.
It does happen.
Yes,
but before it got all crazy, for a long time, it was really consistent. I think the opposite of what you said, though, where it was like I would bleed on the full moon and then ovulate on the new moon. And it was so clear cut and like clockwork. It was really cool.
It is really cool. It feels like you're completely connected to nature. You're not alone. So I think it's just really interesting if you have a calendar. I really like to color in the moon. If you have a lunar calendar, let's say, I think it's fun to color in your bleeding days so that the moon turns red. And then you can kind of keep track of that over the course of a year and see how it shifts. Because depending on what's going on in your life, I do think that they shift. And it's really, really interesting.
It is interesting. It's also interesting to see the shift. I mean, I like what you said. It's cool to see that you're connected and you're not alone. And even just like from the yogic perspective, that's the whole point of yoga, right? Is to be connected with the entire universe, you know? So it's cool to see that start to take effect. But I think it's also really important to recognize the times or the moments in our lives that are really in discord, where we're disconnected, because that's when the work needs to be done. But for me, it's really easy to just be like, oh, whatever, I'll get to it later.
Right. Yeah. And it's interesting. Like all of this stuff that we're talking about is so much easier said than done. But that's why I really encourage people to write down their observations, even just 30 seconds a day, just to note what's going on for them, maybe physically and emotionally or mentally as well. Because when that time of month comes around again, or depending on however long your cycle is, where you start feeling like, oh, what's wrong with me? I'm crazy. I don't want to be around everybody. What's wrong with me? Again, thinking that. It's like we have amnesia. It's like we've never experienced this before. But if you just write it down, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm about to bleed any day now. And it's okay. I'm a little irritated right now. It's all okay. And it just leaves so much room for compassion and kindness for yourself, and just a little bit more patience. But again, if you don't write it down or observe it anywhere, it's like you forget that you go through this, about every month or nearly every month.
I like the word amnesia because almost every month I'm like, what is wrong with me? I
Right.
think I'm going crazy. And then I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. That's what
Yeah.
happens before my
Yes.
period.
Yes. It's so
Because sometimes
funny.
I'm like, I'm a maniac. Like,
Yep.
it's really crazy.
Hmm.
So I guess to circle back. So welcome to Drama Drops podcast, where we just move all over the place. This is just what we do around here. So I think we got here because we were talking about first acknowledging pain, right? Because that's,
Hmm.
I think for a lot of people, that's the first experience. In fact, I was just having this conversation with both Angela and my sister recently about our first periods. And we, all of us were saying that we remember like the day or so before a lot of pain. And of course we were young, so we didn't know what it was,
Yeah.
and so that's the first association. So it's first we acknowledge the pain. And then what would you say would be the next part in terms of sort of reconnecting with our periods?
I think, well, so this is my opinion, really in my own experience, but also beginning to actually learn about what the heck is going on in your body.
Mm-hmm.
So if you could become curious and actually kind of want to educate yourself around what physically is happening to your body, I think it becomes a lot more interesting, and you get kind of amazed about the all the intricacies of the miracle of what's happening in your body.
Mm-hmm.
I think that in school, we're educated to a certain point. I think a very limited point about what is happening
Oh my God, so
with your,
limited.
yeah, so limited. So you don't really grow to have any kind of appreciation or awe of the female body. Um, I think I just remember learning, the sperm is going to swim and, come to the egg, and you're going to grow hair, a little bit of body hair. And
Yep.
yes, but that's really the extent of what I remember. So I think that once you start educating yourself even just a little bit about, maybe some of the different hormones that happen throughout the menstrual cycle, what is happening to the uterus lining as it sheds and regenerates itself. I think it just becomes very interesting, and you get a lot more respect for your body.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like that's kind of the next step. Mhm.
Going back to the word taboo,
Yeah.
when I was talking to Angela and my sister about this, all three of us basically remember our moms saying the only thing my mom said. I can't speak for my sister has the same mom, but she's 10 years older than me, so I can't speak for her experience. But the only thing my mom said to me when I was like, Mom, I think I just got my period. She was like, well, now you can have a baby. And I was terrified. I was like, holy shit, I'm going to have a baby. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I don't know if like moms today are still having those conversations. And like, this isn't a dig on my mom or anything. I mean, I was born in 82. I have a sister that's 10 years older than me. My mom, I mean, she was born in the 40s. So she's coming from a different generation where this was so taboo and you
Right.
can't really talk about it. So she didn't talk to me about it. My first associations with my period were first pain and then fear,
Yeah.
So I think it's really important then to get back into this more conscious curiosity about it, because it's not all pain and fear for sure, but it is
Right.
hard to get past that for sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I totally agree. I remember feeling very like grossed out with myself and embarrassed and kind of ashamed and just awkward, very
Mm-hmm.
awkward. So yeah, I think it starts at a young age of really just better education.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what's happening in the education system right now. I don't have children and I guess I know people who have kids in like this age group, but I haven't really talked to them about it. I don't know what's happening. Have things changed in the world of like sex ed and talking about bodies?
You know, actually that's interesting. I should look more into this. But as far as I know, no.
Oh, great. Perfect.
Yes, lots of work to be done.
Perfect. Just what we want in
Yeah.
2020.
Yeah. I mean, I think probably in more private realms, but I don't think in the
Mm-hmm.
actual education system. So I think if parents are looking to educate their young girls, it's more of in like a private setting, or they're going to have to do some outside work. I don't think it's in the education system.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing too that we were talking about in this conversation about when we got our first periods, all of us, our moms were mad about tampons.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they
They
were
think it's
like so
inappropriate.
yeah, that we're like violating ourselves by using tampons.
Mhm.
So, God, it's no wonder we have so much wrapped up around our periods because it was a complicated thing when you're young. And my hope is that it's less complicated, but I'm not really sure.
Right. Yeah. So I think after trying to kind of address maybe if you're having extreme pain or just really uncomfortable menstrual cycles, I think the first step is usually trying to address that. And I could try to give some pointers at some point during our talk today, if you'd like. And then maybe second step would be to get curious and learn a little bit about what's going on in your body so that you kind of develop a little bit more respect and awe for your body. And then I think the third thing would be to start observing and taking notes around your cycle and doing this with a friend. I think it's way more fun if you have people in your community that kind of know what you're talking about and don't think you're just a crazy person saying like, oh, I'm bleeding today, or, somebody that actually is like, oh, cool, me too. And they don't think you're a weirdo for talking that way.
Yeah, and women, I
Yeah.
think, are like community beings often. I'm sure there's some like lone wolf ladies out there who are like, nope, I'm just doing my thing. But I think most women enjoy, I hate saying things like most women, but I think most women that I know, I should say, most of the women that I know in my, group of friends are pretty community driven. And so it's not surprising to me that that sort of enhances the experience to track these things together.
Right. And again, it goes back to not feeling alone. Like you're not alone in your body because we are connected to nature, and you're not alone because other women are also experiencing this as well. So how fun would it be if you could talk about it with somebody who is also educated and knows how to ride the ebbs and flows of the menstrual cycle like you will once you're a little bit more educated. I'm not saying you specifically. I'm saying once women are a little bit more educated about it, then things can get really fun.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's okay. I feel like you are saying you because like I need to hear this.
I Thank you. Well, I really just mean to you as in the general public.
Sure. Like you, when you said that you started your business because it was like you were looking for something that you needed,
Right.
often that's how my offerings through Dharma Drops and my podcast episodes are often driven because it's something that I want to learn more about or I'm seeking in my own life. So don't worry. Even though I know you're using the universal you, I'm hearing Rebecca.
Okay. All right. Perfect.
So I'd like to talk a little bit more about the herbal stuff that you mentioned, because I don't think we've had anyone on the show yet talk about herbal remedies, especially for women's health. So what are some things that you recommend for women during the premenstrual or during the menstrual phase?
Well, a lot of the times, if somebody's having really bad PMS symptoms, uh, it can be linked to having more estrogen in your system than progesterone. So, one herb that is a really famous women's health herb is called Vitex, Vitex, and that is a hormonal balancer. So, usually you want to take that for at least 3 months every morning.
Mm.
And that can really start to balance things out. And you can take that up for a whole year, but usually for 3 months to a year to start balancing out the estrogen to progesterone hormonal balance. But like I said earlier, everything is connected, right? So if your diet is maybe a little bit lower in healthy fats than what's ideal, or if you have a very stressful few months going on, again, it's likely that you're not going to have enough progesterone in your system. So even though I'm saying, you could help take this herb and that will help out, it's ultimately up to you to try to reduce the amount of stress going on. Do whatever it takes to reduce the amount of stress you have in your life, and then also eating more healthy fats, a lot more than what you would think is necessary, actually.
That's interesting. I wouldn't have thought, not that I wouldn't have thought that. It's just not would have been the first thing I would have guessed would have an effect.
Yeah, because it's really interesting. It's cholesterol and progesterone have a strong relationship. So you need cholesterol in order to make progesterone. And if you are really stressed out, then that cholesterol that you're intaking from food is going to be turned into cortisol, the stress hormone, instead of progesterone.
Interesting.
So your sex hormones are one of the first things to go when you start getting stressed out.
That's really interesting. I had no idea. But you know what's even more interesting is years ago, my cycle was all kinds of messed up. Like you, I had just gotten off birth control. It was like really crazy. But at the time, I was also a vegetarian and I wasn't feeling well and my cycle was all messed up. I went to the doctor and they did my blood work. And actually, my cholesterol was rock bottom. They're like, we got a problem. It's usually the opposite with cholesterol. And they're like, you have almost no good cholesterol in your blood, in blood work. And I was like, oh, shoot. So that was like the thing. I had to get more iron. I had some anemia issues and more cholesterol. And I couldn't tell you if, raising my cholesterol levels helped my cycle because I wasn't thinking about it then. But in hindsight, I'm curious to know if that was part of the issue.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's a perfect example.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's interesting. And that's actually when I stopped being a vegetarian, was because my cholesterol, my iron was so low. And I've really been mostly, with the exception of like normal illness here and there, I've actually been fine ever since.
Right. Because we can get some cholesterol from plants, and then our bodies are able to make a little bit of cholesterol on their own. But primarily we get cholesterol from animal products and animal fat. And unfortunately, I don't have words really, because I totally feel for vegetarians and vegans, the ethical and environmental reasons. I absolutely hear that. But at the same time, it's most herbalists that I know, and a lot of holistic health practitioners working with women's fertility. Oftentimes when somebody is struggling with their menstrual cycle or fertility, it can be linked to vegetarianism or veganism. And I'm so sorry. I'm sure maybe many of your listeners might be upset by that, but usually when somebody
my listeners are awesome. They're not upset.
When they start eating at least eggs, things can really shift.
So while you were talking, I was actually thinking about this Ayurveda workshop I'm in. This was like 5 years ago. What am I talking about? That I was in. Have you done any like Ayurveda study?
A little bit. Yes, a little bit.
So in Ayurveda, in this workshop, they were talking about women's health. And the woman who was running the workshop said that for women who are dealing with fertility issues, it's really important for them to eat at least eggs.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it's because in Ayurveda, I mean, the egg is sort of like this fertile part of, the animal. And so that means the egg can then help women with their fertility. So that's pretty interesting. And I haven't done any more research about it than that. I haven't done any research about it, really. I just had that one experience. But I do believe that everyone's body is really different. And I think for some people, being vegetarian or vegan, it is amazing for them. And it works beautifully. For other people like me, it didn't work and it's not going to work.
Right. Very, very, very valid point that we are all different, and what works for some people isn't going to work for other people. And I would just say that if a woman is really struggling, not feeling well, feeling very fatigued, not getting her menstrual cycle, and she's also vegan or vegetarian, I would encourage to experiment for maybe 2 months of incorporating more, maybe eggs and fish if they're comfortable with that, and see what happens.
That's
If you
interesting.
don't feel good still, then okay, you tried. But if you do feel better, and you are getting your menstrual cycle again, then the proof is in the pudding. So whatever works for you, I think you just have to follow that.
I think that's like the most important takeaway often on Dharma Drops, some of the episodes, that it's often about a matter of experimenting and doing what works for you, because everyone's bodies are so different, all the way down to our menstrual cycles and the way we feel during them, and so what works for you, and what works for other people works for other people. It never has to look the same.
Right.
And I think that's where like keeping track of things can help too, because again, I can't speak for anybody else. I'll be honest. I'm not amazing at keeping track of my cycle. I always want to be, and then I don't. I don't know what my problem is. It's just like a commitment issue. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm afraid of what I'm going to find. I have no idea. But, I think that it's hard to even know what does work for us if we're not paying attention and tracking it.
Yeah. And it's definitely not an all or nothing thing, because we have so many commitments going on every day, all day. To add another thing onto the plate, sometimes it's not realistic. But if somebody's willing to at least keep track of the days that they're bleeding, maybe the days that they notice, okay, I'm going into a little bit of more information here, but one of the main fertility signs that is great to keep track of is your cervical fluid. And if I could go into that as well, but anyways, because that is so interesting to keep track of, it is just a wealth of information once you start keeping track of that. And if you don't, again, we were probably taught to be grossed out or hide the fact that all women produce cervical fluid and mucus, then that's really healthy. And if you don't, then actually that's maybe a little, let's find out why, so we could address that. Anyways, you start keeping track of that. Very interesting to learn what's going on in your body.
Yeah. I think you bring up a good point too, that there's more than one way of doing this.
Yeah.
Too, like some people are probably not interested at all in taking their basal body temperature,
Right.
but they could very easily be like, check, started my period today on their calendar.
Yeah.
And for me, there's so many things in my life that I want to keep track of. I'm always looking for ways to live with intention and a little more fully and such. But really, if I did all the things that are recommended to do every day, I wouldn't be able to do anything else.
Right. That would be your whole life, is just being healthy.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, it would be too much. Right.
Yep, absolutely. But there are different ways for different people. And so that brings me, actually, if I can segue just for a second, we can come back to anything we want. Because as I mentioned pre-recording, the world's our oyster. That brings me into your menstrual calendar journal, because that's actually getting into the very end of how I met you and how we started recording this podcast, as I purchased a few menstrual calendar journals from you to sell on my site. And what I like about it is there are different ways of keeping track of your cycles. So would you mind sharing a little bit about the menstrual calendar journal?
Sure. So, like I said, I got off birth control in 2015. I was on every type of birth control you can imagine. The depot shot, which is absolutely horrible. And if you're on it, anybody listening, get off of it right away.
Actually, I didn't know they still did depot.
Oh, it is very dangerous.
I've heard endless horror stories about the depot shot.
Yeah. So I was on the depot shot, the NuvaRing, different types of the pill, and then ultimately the Mirena IUD, which gave me excruciating pain.
I had the IUD too, the Mirena, and I actually had to have it taken out. It gave me horrible joint pain. I know that sounds crazy.
Yeah, no, not at all.
Well, the doctor said because it's made with silicone, and some people can have, just like breast implants, some people can have a silicone allergy. And so they said it's not super common, but it's not unheard of for people to have a little allergy to it. And it can cause joint pain. Like my hands were aching, my elbows were aching. It was so weird.
Yeah, very, very weird, but there's so many interesting side effects that I don't doubt it, not even 1%.
Sorry, I digress. Your menstrual calendar journal.
Well, okay. So ultimately, I got the IUD removed in 2015, and and I wasn't ready to even think about conceiving yet. So I started just doing online research, like natural birth control. I didn't even know if there was such a thing. It occurred to me to start searching that, and so the very first resource I found is so random. It's a book called Lunaception. It was written in the 1970s by this woman named Louise Lacey, and she, in the 1970s, she got off birth control and was like, "Well, what the heck am I going to do now? I don't want to get pregnant, but I can't be on these, awful pills anymore." And that led her to investigate how to track her cycle with the lunar cycle to avoid conception. Um, and I was thinking, if this lady could do it with the moon, then I can do it too. Which is just so random. I have no clue why I found her book first, but I loved it. And I think that tracking apps did exist in 2015. I just was not aware of them. I had and it never would have occurred to me to track my cycle with an app. It just, me personally, I would never have considered doing that.
How old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, I'm 31.
Okay, so I'm 30 something. I'm 37. I feel like people who are like 30 and up, they do not think of apps as their first go-to.
Right.
I'm serious.
I know.
They don't. I mean, I work at UNC Wilmington, and like all these young students, the app is the first thing they think of. For me, I look through everything first, but oh yeah, there's an app for that, duh.
I know. I also think I am a little bit more like old fashioned in that sense. I love old school methods. I love pen and paper. I love antiques. Old movies. So that's just, I think I'm biased towards, not going towards apps or technology usually as my first, line of defense, I guess.
It's your line of defense.
Yes. So anyways, I started just learning everything I could about natural birth control. And that basically began my journey. I got really into it. I learned all about the fertility awareness-based methods, which is what I use now, and what the menstrual calendar journal is based off of. But essentially what it is, don't worry, it's not about using the moon for either conception or contraception. That was just my little interesting entryway, but it's gotten way more accurate and scientific. So please don't be scared. Anyways, like I said, it's called fertility awareness-based methods, where you are tracking 3 of your fertility biomarkers, and that is your basal body temperature. So that means your waking temperature when you wake up in the morning. It's also checking your cervical fluid or cervical mucus production. So what you see on your underwear, or sometimes when you go pee and you wipe, you might notice certain things, which you should keep track of. And then the third biomarker is your cervix position. So as you approach ovulation, your cervix, basically it becomes softer, and it rises up into towards your vaginal canal. And then when you're not fertile whatsoever, it becomes a little harder and it drops down a little bit more. And if a woman could actually feel this herself by inserting a clean middle finger into her vaginal canal and filling her cervix. So usually the third one I just talked about, the cervix position, is the fertility sign that many people don't check. They just don't bother with that one because it's a little bit more intense and not as easy to get used to. So I think that the cervical fluid one is very easy because we all go pee several times a day, and it's really easy just to get curious and look at your underwear and see what's going on. And then if you're tracking because you want to avoid pregnancy or get pregnant, I really recommend starting to track your basal body temperature, because that's how you can confirm that you've already ovulated. So that's a method that you want to use to confirm ovulation, not to predict when you're going to ovulate.
Right.
And
actually, I didn't know that. I thought it was predictive.
no,
I didn't realize that it was to confirm that you have.
so that's I mean, there's just so many tangents here. So I'm sorry, Rebecca, but
Do not be sorry. You're on the right podcast for tangents.
so this is the scary thing about apps. They're all based on algorithms, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So, and our bodies are not algorithms. They're not machines. So our bodies change every month, from day to day, cycle to cycle. So what day we ovulate on in December is going to be different from when we ovulate in January or February or whenever. So basically, if you use a fertility tracker app, it's best, and you're wanting to avoid pregnancy at all costs, it's best to turn off the predictor mode, because you don't want that piece of technology, that algorithm, telling you if you're fertile or not. Because until they can see your cervical mucus production, I don't understand how they're letting you know if you're fertile or not.
Well, they're probably just basing it off like a really standard, like assuming that your cycle is 28 days every single month.
Right. And
right.
Yeah, so there is a lot of merit to it, because if you're still taking your basal body temperature and putting that information into your app, over time it is going to start to know your body, relatively speaking. But basically, your body temperature increases about 0.5 degree when you have ovulated.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
How am I made it this far in my life and didn't know that?
Well, that's almost everybody. So that's what I'm saying. You're absolutely not alone. I know this stuff because I love the menstrual cycle, and obviously I've created resources around it, and I teach classes on it and all that good stuff. But yeah, I would say most people do not know that. So you confirm ovulation with an increased body temperature, and usually 3 consecutive days of a increased body temperature, okay, I've already ovulated, which means I can have unprotected sex and I won't get pregnant. So I don't want to go too much into that, because there is more education needed to use the fertility awareness methods as conception or contraception. And I can offer some resources here today, and then I offer a lot of resources in the menstrual calendar journal if you want to learn more about that. But I always encourage women to learn their bodies first and paper chart for at least 6 months to a year before they feel confident enough to track with a fertility app, because there's so much to learn, and there's a little bit of a learning curve. But it's honestly, it's like when you are 16 and you're learning how to drive for the first time, and you have to take your learner's test or driver's test. It seems hard and overwhelming to learn all those rules, and but that's only because you've never done it before.
Right.
So it's like cooking. It's anything you've never done before. It seems a little like, oh my God, I don't know if I can know these rules and actually do it. But if you read up, you will be just fine. And also, there is certified fertility awareness educators. So if you really want to get into the cycle charting, and you want some support around that, you could reach out to a certified fertility awareness educator, and they will hold your hand the whole time and make sure you're understanding how to read your charts. And any questions you have about cervical fluid or your body temperatures, they'll walk you through that. So I highly recommend that too. Yeah, but I just remembered your question was, what other ways can you use the calendar? So you can get all into these specifics about cervical fluid and basal body temperature and your bleeding days and all that good stuff. Or you can just be a lot more lighthearted about it, or do both. So you could track, are you hungry on any, are you feeling way more hungry this week than you were last week? Mm-hmm. Are you more horny this week than you were last week? Have you had any bad dreams recently? Are you feeling really social or antisocial? Keeping track of things like that can help you plan your life around your cycle.
Yeah. And I really like I have it right in front of me right now. I really like this section that you have for each month where it's like a wheel and you can just write in, all these different things that you've been experiencing. And it not only is it just really beautiful, but, we often think about tracking how we feel like right before our periods, but this is like the whole month long.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's undated and totally customizable. So you can have fun with it, and you could take note of anything that you find interesting that's going on with your body or your emotions. And you can get all artsy and colorful with it or not. So that's, it's not an all or nothing thing. It's really just what is practical for you.
I'm looking at it right now. It's really beautiful. And like when I saw it online, I decided to carry it. I was like, oh, that's really nice. It's pretty. And then I opened it and I was like, whoa, this thing is so beautiful. So it's a collaboration, right, between you and an artist. Is that correct?
Yes. There's no way this could be what it is without, her name is Anna Friedland. She's an artist and a graphic designer. She turned it into a real piece of art.
It is a piece of art for sure. It's beautiful.
So when I came to her with this idea, I knew that it had to be beautiful. Otherwise, nobody would pay attention to it, because we don't care in our culture. I think a lot of people are starting to take note of their menstrual cycle and, think it can be a fun or a cool thing. But I still think on average, most people don't really care about it or will take the time to learn about it. So putting something out like a menstrual calendar journal, I knew it had to be beautiful and eye-catchy. Otherwise, it would just sit on the shelves. Yeah.
Yeah, it is so beautiful. And in fact, I got the delivery and I opened it and I was meeting my friend Angela, who I've mentioned like 100 times in this episode. I was meeting her. We were going to the Golden Girls puppet show parody. That's what we were doing.
I love the Golden Girls.
Who doesn't love the Golden Girls? It was so good. We ended up, I knew I got us like good seats or whatever at the theater. I thought it was going to be like, I don't know, second or third row. It turns out somehow I bought us VIP seats and we were like in the orchestra pit where we had free cheesecake and coffee. It was like the funniest thing, but we met for dinner before the Golden Girls puppet show. And I was like, Angela, you've got to check out this journal. And she was like, damn it, Becky, now I have something else off of your store to buy. And I was like, yes, I do. But it's just so beautiful. And I like that it's easy. There's something for everyone along the way. Like you said, you can track your basal body temperature. You can keep it lighthearted and just jot things down. It's really beautiful and easy to use.
Yeah. And I feel like I want people to really have fun with it. And there's pages for you to write down your new moon wishes or your monthly goals, and kind of how can you use your cycle to attract what you want.
Interesting.
Yeah, because during certain phases of our cycles, we are way more energetic, way more inspired. And then other phases where we're, like I said, we're really receptive to intuition. And, maybe if you pray or speak to loved ones who have passed on or, God or the universe, whatever you want to call it, there are times when we're really just tapped in and tuned on. Tuned in is what I want to say.
Like tuned on. You were tuned on to the universe.
Right. So how can you use that as you're creating the reality that you want?
That's awesome. Because I often think that, at least I can only speak for myself, but I often feel like my period or often how I feel throughout my cycle of the month, it's a distraction from what I want. It's like, oh, I don't feel good right now or whatever. But I like this idea that we can flip that script and we can change this into something that can help us really tune in or tune onto the times when we can really manifest what we want. And then maybe other times it's a good time to sit and be more meditative and do a little less.
Absolutely. And then also this just makes so much sense to me in nature. Nothing is blooming year round, right? There, a lot of times there's death and decay, and that's completely critical and important so that the plant is able to regenerate itself in spring. So, and the menstrual cycle mimics that as well. We definitely need time to rest and hibernate and really just maybe do a lot less if we can swing it, or at least baby ourselves as much as possible, so that way we do have more energy later on in your cycle. And it ultimately, so me and the artist who collaborated to make this, we only worked we made this very quickly. It's because we used our menstrual cycle. We anytime we were PMSing or day 1 or 2 of our cycle, we wouldn't work on it. We were like, no, there's just no way. And then when we were both in the high peak of our cycle, we were just kicked butt on it.
That's really cool. That was actually sort of brings me to something else I wanted to ask you. In the yoga communities, I don't know about in like the general fitness communities, but in the yoga world, often we talk about not practicing yoga on your period. And I was wondering, you were saying how when we're bleeding, it's a good time for rest. I was actually wondering what your thoughts were surrounding doing things like yoga or exercise when you're on your period. And like you just said, like you didn't, if you were on the first or second day of your cycle, you wouldn't work on this stuff. So do you sort of feel the same way about exercise?
So when you are like approaching ovulation, you have way more energy and physical strength and stamina. And that's because you also have like a little bit of testosterone surging during that time as well. So that is a time where really you're more likely to feel very physical and want to exert energy. And then when you are approaching your period, your hormones are dropping. They're cascading really quickly, or not really. They're cascading. So you have a depletion of energy for sure. So you're going to feel maybe a little bit more sleepy, anyways. And actually that is more or less when you have more progesterone in your system too. So, and that is known as a pregnancy hormone. So you're just sleepy. But then also I think your ligaments become really susceptible to overstretching.
Oh, interesting.
You become a lot more flexible. And so you're prone to injury.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've also heard things too that you're a little more susceptible to like colds and flus and stuff before your period. I don't know if that's true or not. I've heard it before, but I think it's because like you said, things are sort of cascading a little bit,
Yeah.
so it's just interesting. I always say, because people ask me, my yoga students will ask me like, should I practice on my period? I always tell them just listen to your body. Cause there's some months where I'm like, I'm not doing anything. And there are other months where I actually feel pretty good. And I'm like, you know what? I'm ready to go for a run, but that's pretty rare.
Yeah, I know. I 100% what you said. What does your body actually feel like doing? Not what you think you should be doing. So if you feel like you need a little bit of community and you want to take a class, then you should absolutely do that. And if you don't feel like going upside down or doing anything crazy, then don't. But I think that's the rule of thumb is what do you feel like doing? What does your intuition say?
And that's like the feminine approach. Listen to your intuition, right?
Yeah.
Like we're always talking about women as like the intuitive body, so listen to it. It'll tell you what to do.
Right.
I think it's really cool that you guys made this journal listening to your cycles. And I feel like that's part of the reason why I think the journal feels so good when you look through it. It has like an authenticity. It's not just because you made a menstrual calendar journal, it's because you made it using your menstrual calendar journal. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, it's thank you for saying that.
Yeah, of course.
And yeah, like you said, when you see it online, I really don't have many pictures of the details going on inside, just because I think that is for the people who really resonate with this. They're going to purchase it and they get
Mhm.
all the gifts inside.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
for sure.
but and also it's just really, it's like, how do you photograph this? I don't really know.
Actually, I was putting pictures of it up on my website and I was like, I don't even know how you make this look like it
What it
looks
is.
because it's also big. It's hard
Right.
to like see. It's like what, 12 by 12?
Yeah. Size
Yeah,
of
it's
usual
hard to see.
calendar. Hmm.
Mhm. And the pictures I feel like don't do it justice.
Yeah. Not to toot my own horn, but I agree.
Girl, you can toot your own horn as much as you want.
Yeah.
So, is there anything else that you would like to share? Any like big takeaway, like one important thing, if there's anything that listeners should know? Do you have anything that you want to share?
I think I really just want to say that learning about your menstrual cycle and how that connects you to yourself more and to nature more is not an all or nothing thing. I think it can happen gradually, little by little, as you become curious or not. You know, um, so I just think if you use a period tracker app, or you have your own calendar already, I think it's really great to keep track of what's going on in your body, however you decide to do it, however resonates with you. So I again, just, it's not an all or nothing thing. I think it's, try to have fun with it and be curious.
Yeah,
um,
I
yeah.
think curiosity is a really good takeaway.
Yeah, and then I would just like to give some resources.
Yeah, please.
So okay, just because I don't want to leave anybody in pain. So if somebody's having really horrible menstrual cramps, it's not normal. I mean, let's say it is normal and it is common, but
Sure.
it doesn't mean that it has to be
Sure.
normal or healthy. So if you're suffering uh, with something more severe like endometriosis, then that's something you definitely need more medical attention with.
Mhm.
Um, And on average, it takes about 10 years to get diagnosed with endometriosis.
Oh, really?
While all that time, these women are in excruciating pain. So if you're in excruciating pain, that is not okay. And don't take no for an answer. Keep seeking help for that.
I love
Uh,
that. Don't take no for an answer because
yeah.
it is really easy to be dismissed at the doctor sometimes. And I've been
Yes.
dismissed more than once by gynecologists. One time I
Hmm.
was having a lot of problems, and the gynecologist was like, maybe this is more mental and you should see a different type of doctor.
Yeah.
So, you know what the problem was, though? My birth control was causing tremendous problems. So I stopped the birth control, and guess what? Problem went away.
Yes,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Same with me. When I wanted to get the Marina out, my gynecologist was very against it because um, I think she was coming from a good place. She didn't want me to get
Sure.
pregnant when I wasn't ready to get
Sure.
pregnant, but she did not have the faith in me to learn about fertility awareness methods. And I, I mean, this sounds like childish, but it really hurt my feelings. Actually, she didn't have any kind of faith or confidence in me as a woman to
Mhm.
learn about my body. And I mean, it was borderline rude. She was very aggressive and
Mhm.
didn't believe me that I was in excruciating pain from it. And then when she finally went to remove it, she couldn't locate it because
Oh,
it had
no.
dislodged. And it's like, yes, I told you something was wrong. Uh,
And I think it's important to note that I do medical professionals. My dad's a physician, right? So, I mean, I have a lot of respect for medical professionals,
yeah,
and I really believe that they are coming from a good place. It's just a different perspective.
right.
It's just a different way of practicing healthcare.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, so it is coming from a good place. And even that doctor, it really pissed me off when she was like, maybe you need to see a different type of doctor, like sort of insinuating I need to see like a therapist about it.
Uh huh.
I don't think she was trying to be a jerk. I think that's what she thought.
Yeah, that's what she was trained in. Yeah.
So she was
Yeah.
actually trying to help me. It just
Right.
wasn't actually what needed to happen at the time.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah. So anyways, if you are in
Yeah.
excruciating pain, get help. So if you just have pretty bad cramps, like you have to take some Advil or you just don't feel good. I really recommend taking a B complex vitamin and magnesium.
Mm.
The Vitality Calm is my favorite brand of magnesium. About 300 milligrams of that every day can be very, very helpful to PMS. So B complex vitamin, magnesium, those two things as supplements, making sure you're getting enough healthy fats and also leafy green vegetables too, for
Mm.
sure.
Mhm.
Trying to reduce as much stress as possible. Um, if you're curious about learning about fertility awareness based methods of natural contraception and conception, uh, an amazing book is called Taking Charge of Your Fertility by Toni Weschler. It's a huge book, but you won't have to read it all because it goes into other female reproductive concerns. But absolutely get your hands on that book.
Cool.
An amazing podcast about fertility is called Fertility Friday.
Oh, I like that. Fertility Friday.
Yes, it is just a wealth of information. The host of the podcast interviews real women and also medical professionals.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, holistic professionals, and then allopathic MDs as well. So just everything you could ever want is on Fertility Friday. And I think that's it.
Awesome. Those are really great resources. And for those of you listening, I'll add those resources into the show notes. So that way, because I know people listen when they drive and they're like, oh, I got to go back and make note of that. And then they forget.
Yeah.
So for easy access to these resources, just check out the show notes and they'll be in there for you.
Yeah. One last thing. Another
Yeah.
resource is this website is called Facts, FACTS. And it's made by medical doctors for medical doctors to learn about fertility awareness based methods, because it's not just like religious or natural family planning, has nothing to do with religion. This is all scientific based awareness methods if you don't want to be on hormonal birth control. So it's a great way to educate yourself and your doctor so they don't think you're just making something up.
Sometimes I think my doctors think I'm crazy because I'm all like, well, I mean, I'm like, they look at me like I'm nuts because I'm at the doctor. I'm like, well, I'm not really into like prescription medicine.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, then why are you here?
Yeah. I mean, there's a time and a place for it.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But maybe not as the first solution always. So yeah.
And I feel like I don't want a dog. I feel like I like dogs and medical professionals a little bit. I don't want to. And I just want to give a shout out to the lovely folks here in New Hanover County, the coastal midwives and OBGYNs who have been fantastic to me over the last few months as I've been dealing with some problems. They're a really great testament to an organization that can combine sort of a more holistic emotional approach with like modern science. They were awesome. So just a shout out to them and just a reminder that I'm not a hater over here, I swear.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So anything else that you want to share with us before we part ways today?
No, I just want to say thanks for listening. And then if anybody has questions, they could reach out to me by email.
Yeah, what's your email address?
It's Veronica at Kapu, KAPU.community.
Awesome. And do you have any social media that we should be checking out?
I have an Instagram at Kapu, KAPU.community.
Awesome. And folks, just a reminder, you can always find me at Dharma Drops Podcast. Oh no, I'm a liar. It's Dharma Drops _podcast on Instagram. But keep in mind too, that once you've listened to this episode, you can head over to shopdharmadrops.com and you can get the menstrual calendar journal 25% off with the coupon code CYCLE, CYCLE. So head over there, check out the menstrual calendar journal, and then use the coupon code cycle for 25% off of the journal. And then bada bing, bada boom, you can track your whole cycle, and you can get it with friends and do it together, just like Veronica said we can.
Yes, please do.
Yeah, for sure. So guys, thanks so much for being here and listening. Veronica, thank you so much for taking the time to share your wealth of information.
Thank you, Rebecca. It was really fun.
Yeah, I had a good time too. All right, guys. Well, until we meet again next time, bye. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Dharma Drops. Just as a reminder, for as little as $2 a month, you can get exclusive podcasts, swag, merch, yoga classes, meditations, and more by becoming a supporter on Patreon. Just head over to patreon.com/Dharma Drops. As always, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to Dharma Drops podcast on whatever app you're listening on. It's a great way to show your support, as well as a great way to share the podcast with others. And to see all of the Dharma Drops offerings, including the weekly card readings, the shop, and more, just head over to dharmadropspodcast.com. All right, guys, that's it for this episode. Bye.